Hello and welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Glenn Muller is a local author who was born in the United States, spent his early years in England before immigrating to Canada and becoming a Canadian citizen. His writing is broad-based, including writing a sports column and also producing articles and making presentations for amateur astronomy clubs and conventions. Now that sounds interesting. Glenn has released 5 full-length novels to date, and today we're going to discuss his most recent, The Pipe Smoker's Cut, and that's an interesting name. Welcome to Scribes and Songsters.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, you've certainly had an interesting journey. And I thought maybe I would get you to take us back to your early days and then bring you to a point of where you are today. So let's go stateside.
Stateside, okay. That didn't last very long. My parents, will go back even further, were figure skaters in an ice show in Munich, Germany.
Wow.
Which was where they met. My mother mostly did the chorus line stuff. My father, coming from the States, was very good with the lasso. And he did one of those trick rope acts on skates, like a cowboy jumping.
No kidding.
The rope and the whole bit. They met, and my mother became pregnant, so they moved back to the States and had me. But their relationship was somewhat tempestuous, didn't last. And so when I was 18 months old, my mother took me to England, where her mother lived, in Denton.
Wow. And I know where Denton is.
And you know where Denton is, which is amazing. So there I lived until I was about 10 years old. And then we emigrated to Canada, living mainly in Burlington.
Why?
Why? Back in the 70s, England was going down the tubes. There was a lot of unrest, a lot of unemployment. And my godparents had moved from England to Canada. They said, come to Canada. It's the place to be. And I'm so glad we did, because Canada's a great country, and I'm really happy that we made the move. It's been great.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
When did you realize that you wanted to be a writer? I mean, take me back to your school days. Is this something you always knew you were a writer?
Well, We'll go way back. I will tell you that I was the last person in my class to learn the alphabet. How old are you? 5 or 6, something like that in school. And the problem was not that I was slow, but I already knew how to read by the time I got to school. So the teacher rolls out this alphabet. You got to learn the alphabet. And I'm thinking, what's the point? These letters are no good until you put them into words. And, so you guys go off and learn what order they come in, come back to me when you're ready to read a book. Well, that didn't go over too well. I got the test and I managed the first few A, B, C, D. I think there's a W in there, maybe an X. I went with the letters of my name, probably in that order, handed the sheet in. The teacher says, don't come back tomorrow until you know the alphabet.
Wow.
So I went home and, 6 years old, I've got all my stuffed toys, a teddy bear and a squirrel and a rabbit and a dog. I lined them up on the bed and I said, right, if I have to learn this stupid alphabet, you do too. So I taught them the alphabet and the next day I went in. As far as writing, it was probably about a year later, same school, probably the same teacher because they went through the grades with us. I got really interested in airplanes. As young boys do. And Denton, where we lived, we were on the flight path to Manchester Airport. And we weren't getting buzzed, but the planes were low enough that I could see the markings on them. And I could tell, a jet from a prop plane and a Boeing from a de Havilland and, Luftwaffe from BOAC. And so I'd go outside and I'd look and I'd notice that certain planes came over at certain times. So I started writing down the times. And it occurred to me after I got this whole list and I started writing down other things about airplanes that I knew quite a bit about airplanes and I should put it into a book. So I got my mom to buy me a notebook and I'm writing down everything I know about airplanes and drawings and the whole bit. And I showed it to my teacher and she was quite impressed and she had me, stand up and show the class. So that was my first book. My next book came something like 50 years later.
Oh, just a short span of time.
Yeah. I didn't really do any creative writing after that until in my teens when I started writing some poetry. I guess the hormones were kicking in and you start writing poetry and listening to music, lyrics and stuff like that.
So were you writing like poetry for girls or?
Sort of. I found what I would do is I would listen to the lyrics of songs and I would use the beats of the songs and change the words of the lyrics. So that was a start. And then I started writing some other poetry and some of it was Alice Through the Looking Glass stuff, really off the wall.
Yeah.
And then I just started writing some short stories just for fun to amuse me and my friends. But it wasn't until probably 1990s that I actually started thinking about writing a book, a novel.
And like, was there something that sort of sparked that,
Sparked me to write a book?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always been an avid reader. Even from, reading the alphabet and on, I was into books, always. I'm still into books. And it got to the point, back then, we didn't really have iPads and the internet. If you wanted books, you went to the library. So you'd take the trip to the library, you get a whole knapsack of books, you come home. And I've got a very short attention span for books that don't hold my attention. You've got to grab me. And that's a tenet. You've got to grab the reader right from the start. If you don't, I just toss it aside and go on to the next one. And I'd probably gone through about 3 or 4 books of the pile I brought home. And I thought, geez, is there nothing good in here? I can write better than this. So after doing this for a little while, I thought, okay, smart pants, let's see you do it. So the other thing that sort of got me into this, I found that writing poetry and writing short stories, I was doing it all by longhand because we didn't have personal computers. And I'm a perfectionist. I'll read a line. If I don't like it, I'll scratch it out. But I don't like it scratched out. It's got to be neat. So I start and I write the whole thing out again. So I didn't do a lot of writing that way. But when we got our first computer, I remember my wife brought it home. It was a Zenith with 2 floppy disks, no hard drive, DOS. And but the word processor came up. And I start playing on the word processor. And I thought, oh, this is what I need. You can change words. It did. Of course, it revolutionized me and 2 million other people out there that suddenly became authors. But yeah, so I started writing just some scenes, starting with a scene. And see where it goes. And
is that how you write today? Do you write in scenes? I mean, what do you start with? Do you start with a character or do you start with a description of a scene?
Let's talk about The Pipe Smoker's Cut. I'd written Ruggage, which was the last book in my series, and I was a little bit burned out, so I didn't write anything for a few months. But then I get the urge. And I thought I would just like to write a scene about a guy waking up on a train. Let's see where it goes. So what kind of a train? Well, let's make it a nice train. Let's go back to, when the trains were nice, not all plastic and chrome. So he's on a train. He's in England. He wakes up. He looks out the window. Oh, it's raining, but he's in the countryside. And he remembers where he's going. Well, where is he going? Well, I'm not sure yet, but he doesn't want to go there. Why doesn't he want to go there? Well, he's got to give some bad news. So then I start developing this story. What's the bad news? Well, it turns out that scene, as you probably know, ends up being chapter 11.
Yes.
Right? So I don't start in at the beginning like you think you do. It probably could have been the beginning, but, to build up to why he was on the train, I had to backtrack 10 chapters to get there.
The Pipe Smoker's Cut. That's a very interesting title.
Right.
Now, the pipe smoker I get. Where did the rest of the title come from?
I don't smoke. Never have. If I had, I probably would have smoked a pipe. But I thought if I'm going to talk about this guy that smokes a pipe, part of the scene, it's nice when they're having dialogue for your characters to doing something. Wouldn't it be nice if the character was filling a pipe while he's talking? Well, I know nothing about pipes and smoking. So I do some research. And I find out that pipe smokers have their own preference of cut. You buy a tin of tobacco, but there's different cuts. There's ribbon cut, cube, flake, puck. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of them. And I just thought the pipe smokers cut, because that tin of tobacco, not to give anything away, comes into play.
Before we continue with this one, I just wanted to mention, you mentioned one of your other books, but you've written 3, and it is a Boomerang a novelette?
No, it's a full novel, but it's a standalone. It's a story just by itself.
Yeah. The other 3 are a series.
Correct.
And sort of, are they a continuation of the same characters throughout the whole 3 novels?
Yes. The core characters go through. It's a blend of amateur sleuth and police procedural. So you've got the police detective and his sergeant are characters all the way through. You've got the main character and his girlfriend and his friends who are characters all the way through. It's just different murders and stuff that the main character gets himself involved in. And it's one of those basic amateur sleuth where the police captain doesn't like the amateur sleuth, and the amateur sleuth can't tell the police captain everything, but they all come together in the end.
Now, you talked about the pipe smokers. Without giving too much away, give us a summary of the book, of the story.
A summary of the book. Well, it's the pipe smoker, the fellow on the cover is absolutely perfect for the catalyst in the story, the pipe smoker. He's probably what I would call a supporting actor, not a real antagonist, but he's a catalyst. And the main character meets this fellow in college and realizes he's a bit of a cad. And then they go their separate ways, but they meet again in the trenches, in the Somme. And, of course, there's all explosions and stuff. And the main character gets injured, and when he comes to, he's told that his friend, the pipe smoker, has died, but he's left him this package. The padre says, "This is the guy's personal belongings. Would you please take them to his family?" Which he does. So he starts getting involved with the family and finds out that the family has some secrets, but he finds out more about his friend that he didn't know before, who's a rather dark character. And as he starts delving into this guy's dark character and trying to find answers, he just gets deeper and deeper and deeper into what he's gotten into. And it seems to get worse every chapter, what this guy's been up to. So he has to find his way out of that.
So this main character, Daniel Turcotte.
Yes.
So he was an American who is now in England.
Right.
And was there some sort of bit of you in this character?
No. I did that because I didn't want Daniel to get drafted or conscripted.
Right.
You know, all of the British young fellows during World War I were conscripted. They had to go into the army. I didn't want him to do that because I wanted a different angle, right? I wanted to give him more freedom, not to be stuck in a trench somewhere. Right. And so I made him American. That way he didn't have to get conscripted, but he ends up going anyway.
As a photographer?
As a photographer.
Do you know much about photography?
Not a lot.
And now the other character, there was a lot in this. So it was centered around the First World War. There was the flu of 19...
Yes, the pandemic.
The pandemic.
Yeah.
How much research did you do on the period?
A ton. An absolute ton, because it's a different period from what I was used to writing in. And it was fascinating. You know, there's just so much stuff and so much I wanted to put in, but, you know, I can only put this bit in and that bit in. You know, I found out about the General Post Office and what an organization that was.
Tell us a bit about it.
The General Post Office during the war handled something like 12 million packages a day. And they seemed to get to their destination all over the world within days. I don't think we can do that now.
Forgive me, Canada Post, but you can send something from Windsor to Chatham and it takes a week.
Exactly. So, I had to put that in, and I actually used that as a way to get my character around as well.
And what about, everything that was sort of going on during that pandemic time? You seem to have done a lot of research about that as well.
Right. Well, you look up, the Great Britain, 1914 to 1918, what's going on? Mm-hmm. What's making history? What is happening in 1917? What's happening in 1918? And you find out about the Bolshevik Revolution, which was in the States, where the Tsar and his family were killed. But that actually started in a pub in London in 1908.
I found that fascinating. Sort of expand on that a little bit for our listeners.
Well, the main people was it Trotsky and I forget their names now.
Lenin.
They were actually exiled because they were stirring it up back in Russia. So they were somewhat exiled and they came to London. So they start meeting in pubs in London and they're talking about the overthrow of the Tsar and starting a revolution. The only thing was that Lenin, and I think it was Trotsky or someone else, they didn't agree on how to go about it. Anyway, Lenin had the larger group, and large group in Russian is Bolshevik.
I bet most people don't know that.
So they do now. So that's how they came to be called the Bolsheviks. So the Bolshevik Revolution actually started in London, or at least the formulation of it started in London. And of course, what was happening over in Russia is also happening in England and other places, Italy, Spain, wherever. They've all got the right-wing groups or the communist groups, or, it's the same today. There's all these different groups, not of all whom we like, but they're there.
Mm-hmm. And certainly England at the time did have a large communist contingent among the population.
Oh, yeah. They had communist parliamentarians, which is fine. Everybody should have a say. But it was definitely a part of the government and part of life. And the problem was, with the war, there's a shortage of everything. And now the soldiers are coming back. So with all the soldiers coming back, there's not enough jobs for them. And so there's a lot of unrest, and unrest breeds revolution.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think people would be really intrigued to even learn that little bit about Lenin and Trotsky and that start of the revolution. Uh-huh. I was fascinated reading it. So let's go to this Daniel's friend.
Right.
What kind of friend?
Right.
Jeremy. Now, he was quite a character.
He was. As I write, I never know where the story's going. I'm a pantser. You know what a pantser is. There's pantsers and there's plotters. Plotters sit down and they figure out the story, and then they start writing. Pantsers start somewhere and just see where it goes. And Jeremy was one of those characters where I just needed someone to provide Daniel with a family to go and take and break the news about. At the start, I did not know what a bad character Jeremy was. And the other characters as well. They just continue to surprise me. I start writing them and holy smokes, who are you?
Daniel and Jeremy had a very sort of interesting relationship. It wasn't like two, good old friends, good old comrades.
Right. No. They both met in college, and Daniel needed a place to stay, a flat to stay. And Jeremy said, I've got a place, you can come and stay with me. So Daniel is there because he needs a place to stay. Jeremy is there because he needs the money. He needs the money because he's gambled all his other money away. So that's basically their relationship. But Jeremy is one of those people that only thinks about himself. He's a narcissist and...
Bit of a cad.
A cad is the exact word. Yeah.
And it's interesting because, as I was reading about him, I was seeing some of the characters in some of the British movies about the time, where you have these English young men at universities, and their relationships and their caddish behavior, etc. And it was very much like this character.
Right. Yeah, and I think at the time it was very easy to do because of the class system.
Yes,
the upper crust, and it was very easy for those with to look down on those without, and become quite snobbish.
Yep. And his sister George. Now there was a character.
She surprised me most of all. Yeah.
So tell people why. We got a kick out of her.
Well, George was very avant-garde. She was one of those privileged daughters of a well-to-do family, just coming into the flapper age. And she was very avant-garde, and she went her own way. And I really don't want to give too much about where she went.
Yes.
But she turned out to be a real character. And she reminded me of another character in Torque. There's a character in Torque called Brittany Reese. And I started reading about her. I needed this person to be doing something. I just bring in a character. I need you to do something. Yep. And they take off.
Yeah.
They just take off.
Interesting how they do that.
Yeah. And Brittany Reese turned out to be a real piece of work, let me tell you.
Yeah. And I was surprised. George was very sexually liberal, and I suppose that was sort of part of the times as well. Going into that flapper era, and maybe women were becoming a little more aggressive.
I finished reading a book a couple of months ago. Can't remember the name of it. True story, and it was about the Edwardian age. And I think it was in South Africa, where a lot of British colonists went, and they had money and the whole bit. And they had these outrageous parties. I mean, really outrageous parties. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, the whole bit. And reading more into this and through this book, it was almost an accepted part of Edwardian society among the upper classes to do a lot of partner swapping.
No kidding.
It was. It wasn't really talked about.
Now, Daniel suspected that Jeremy may not have, bit the dust in the war, but that makes it a very interesting twist. If somebody hasn't already cottoned on to the fact that Daniel is a little bit skeptical about whether or not he died, and then it's as though the book takes on another life of its own. After that, it almost becomes like an MI5.
Yep.
Plot.
Yeah, because the stuff that Jeremy was into, that Daniel didn't know about, it gets into these Bolsheviks. And of course, Jeremy can spin a tale too. He'll tell you, I'm working for MI5, and you're really, come on. But so Daniel, having contacts through his father, goes and investigates through MI5. Do you really know this guy? So that's where we start getting into, MI5, they don't tell you a heck of a lot, but they'll use you. And they start to use Daniel a little bit. And he's naive, but he catches on quickly.
And of course, I don't want to give anything away, but George becomes quite an integral part of that part of the book.
Yeah, she sort of picks up in a way where Jeremy left off. After all, they are. It's family ties in a way.
Yeah. Were any of the characters based on people you know? Or personalities you know?
No.
Or do you do that?
No, I do. In a way, I have someone in mind, and it's not necessarily someone that I know. It could have been a character I've seen on TV.
Yeah.
The main character in Torque is based on myself and a bunch of my friends at the time, just taking parts, this and that. But of course, all fiction, of course, nothing that we ever did like that. But sometimes I do have an inspiration. If I need someone I want to beat up in a book,
Look out.
Say no more. Nudge, nudge, right?
Do you have a favorite character in
any of
Pipe?
the books?
Oh, yeah.
In the Pipe Smoker's Cut, my favorite character was Little Albert.
Tell us about Little Albert.
He's just there for one or two scenes. He's just there, and Little Albert shows up when Daniel gets off the train, and Little Albert's there.
I liked him.
And Daniel gets off the train in Sainsville. He hasn't been to Sainsville. He needs a place to stay. And Daniel just rides up. Who are you? You know, who are you? What are you doing here? You know, let me help you out. And so for a chapter or so, Little Albert helps
people will
him
like
out.
Little Albert.
But I liked him.
Yeah. Who did you dislike?
Which of the characters did I not like?
Yeah.
If I had to pick one that I really didn't like, probably Pamela at MI5.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't. She wasn't very nice.
No, she wasn't.
No.
But we won't tell people about her. We'll let them find
Right.
out. What are you working on now?
I'm working on the sequel to the Pipe Smoker's
How far
Cut.
along are you?
About 10,000 words. About 5 chapters.
Yeah. When do you expect to put a lid on it?
Maybe this time next year. I don't know. I haven't gone too far as to where it's going. I've got a few ideas, a few elements that I want to put in there.
Yeah.
But I think I set the bar really high for myself with the Pipe Smoker's Cut.
Yeah, I agree. It is very well written. I really enjoyed it, I have to tell you.
Thank you. And you know, I won't put anything out that is not at least as good as or better than that. So there may be a few rewrites in there.
I'll look forward to it.
Yeah.
And where can people buy your books?
My books are all online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo. Here in the local area, the Indigo at Devonshire Mall in Windsor has my books. So, yeah, that would be the place to go. You can look up my website, glennmuller.ca, and I've got links to where to buy all my books as well.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure.
Well, that's it for another edition of Scribes and Songsters. Goes way too quickly, but many thanks to our guest, Glenn Muller. Thanks to our Scribes and Songsters team, producer Brad Sweet, and technical producer and editor Gary Glass. Grateful thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation, and to Neil and Tina Queering for their support. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon, right back here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Bye for now.